Okay, so what is Christian nationalism and is it Christian? That's our topic today. And I'm glad that you're all here. We're ready to dig in and we're going to start soon. I can't get on that. There we go. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is the safe conversation, a very simple, I don't know, value system for safe conversations. And so that's how we're starting because we're all over the map on this, and there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding or different understandings. And so to come to a place where we may be at different places, but we want to be able to listen and hear the other, meet them where they are. So here are some skills. Talking without criticism. It's in sometimes a charged topic. It's hard to do that. Listen with curiosity and without judgment. Well, that's idiotic. Well, that's not what we're going to be about. And connecting beyond the differences. So what do we have in common? The thing is, my guess is that everyone loves this country greatly. And so there's a lot of feelings around this, and a lot of feelings, I would say, also of grief for what we have lost. And we might want to kind of individually name some of those things, of what we feel like we have lost. Let's start out in the excitement. Table talk after introductions. Make sure you know everyone at your table. If you're along this back wall, like the good Presbyterians, then get in groups of, say, 3, preferably people that you aren't married to. And so the question is the USA a Christian nation? Why or why not? And has your opinion changed over your lifetime? And if so, why? Okay, so we're going to take, try to listen, give people a chance to talk, and no one monopolize, okay? Because we are only going to take about, and we're running late, so this whole thing, we'll take about 8 or 10 minutes. I'll see how it's going in 8 minutes. And so feel free to talk among yourselves after you introduce yourself. Make sure that everyone at the table knows everyone. Let's talk about it. No. Thank you for all of this.
I wonder, I feel like I remember a while ago, I should have probably tried, or I was thinking about it, I should have tried to switch to the one singular one and not having a room mic, because I feel like I remember yours not liking the speaker, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
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 It was like, yes, this is not an option. It was
so here's a question. So there is a embedded video. There's an embedded video on one slide, and it goes to a Facebook thing. What it did when I tested it before, like at 8:45, it put the video on my thing. So you may have to stop that, scoot it over here, and we didn't necessarily have sound on it.
Okay. So
there's no one online, right? To do okay.
But I'll just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Do you remember which?
Yeah, I can show you. It's down here. Maybe here, no, right about this guy. Right about that. There it is. Control click. So when it's playing on there, it's actually, so it may come over here and you may have to move it over there. Mine started playing immediately, but then I couldn't hear the sound. So if we can't hear the sound, I will just scoot it back and I will just read what he says.
Do you want me to try to test out the sound now?
No. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, what I can do is I can make it really quiet.
Yeah, sure.
Put it through.
Yeah. Yeah. Can hear it. Yeah. I don't know why my settings are weird. Okay. I know there's lots more to be said. I invite you to continue these conversations, maybe even with this crazy little hodgepodge group that you were just thrown together with. And y'all, it sounds like y'all have done a great job in following the 3 rules. So great. Good job. Nobody has stormed out. That's good. Okay. So hold that you have just engaged in. And then what does it mean to be a religious nation, a Christian nation, a Jewish nation, a Islamic nation? What does it mean to be a religious nation? And I've got a lot to talk about, but as you know, jump in, okay? Jump in. So religious nations use religion as a tool for state power and control. Now, we may not think that about the US. We would never do that. But that is historically and in many parts of the world presently what's happening.
They do it for state too.
Yeah.
They-
Commandments in every classroom.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Mixing national interests with theological stands, which threatens to distort both the faith and the governing basis of the country. It messes with both because they're both about different things and about a different hierarchy of power and who's at the top. Yeah. Religious nations in history have gutted the faith, resulted in religious in name only or culturally religious people, but devoid of the spirit. And we see that all throughout Europe, these grandiose, empty churches that we wonder how they got built. Well, they had more money than just the ones who were paying for their, their indulgences. There's not enough indulgences in the world to pay for some of the buildings that are constructed over there. And without the government being involved in pouring money in, you have a building like ours. And look at the difference in I ordered room service. Thank you. I'll give you a tip. Oh, all right.
Remember that.
Yeah, hold that thought. Thank you. Yes, and so if you go to any of these countries, it's important to travel, y'all. You see the emptiness. Where is the church? And I don't mean the buildings, the church, right? And then also in Israel. I mean, so in all of these, Israel, Palestine, Jewish, Islamic, Christian, uh, sometimes Protestant, sometimes Catholic in these here. Emptiness, like people, only a small fraction are actually practicing. And yet they have named or do name themselves with that religion. You know, we are a Jewish state. We are a Catholic nation. We are, you know, and so this is our history. So we're going to do a little bit of history study. Religious nationalists use narrow religious and theological beliefs, often cherry picking. What I mean is going in and picking this verse to justify what I'm about. And so it gets very narrow, not representative of the whole scriptural basis, no matter whether that's the Hebrew Old Testament, the Quran, or the, you know, the Bible, the Christian Bible. So in this, you see what we can point to 9/11 and the jihadists, right? And they've taken like a line or two out of the Quran, and they're not listening to the whole rest of the Quran, which is a great deal about peace and faithfulness and how to treat the least of these. So it's a fundamentalist kind of setup, we'll say. And okay, so let's look at Christian states historically. Christian states. The Roman Empire. Oh my gosh. Constantine became a Christian in 306. In 313, this is right after he made his coins. In 313, there was agreement between the Emperor Constantine, which was the Church of the West, and Licinius, who was the Church of the East, that all religions would be accepted. And this stopped the persecution of the Christians. And so they had all of these worship to all these gods, but the Christians were getting persecuted. So the Edict of Milan evened out the land, the territory, and it allowed Christians to be free, quote, in their religion, unless it came against the government. And Constantine started pouring money into the church. For instance, he gave the bishops his wife's palace. Now, what could go wrong? I mean, really, my wife just got a palace. My husband just got a palace. Right? I mean, there are strings attached there, y'all. What bishop should have a palace? I remember being over in Scotland just 2 years ago with our group, and we were in St. Andrews, and they were talking about how the archbishop, at the palace, and it shows the dungeon with all of the torture stuff in the archbishop's palace. Like, that doesn't make sense, does it? But when you start getting money and tied in together, that's what happens. So Constantine rules the whole empire in 324 after defeating Licinius. Now, would you call this a Christianized war? I bet he did, because he's a very faithful Christian. So he's using God to defeat them. And I get, for God, this big old territory, and wait, I also get to be emperor of it. There's some kudos there. And Constantinople becomes the new center of the Christian world. Now, 324 might get some of your attention because in 325 was the Council of Nicaea, which he called. Constantine called the Church Council of Nicaea. I don't know what business he had in doing that, except to try to get all of the warring in the church taken care of, because there was a guy named Arius who was saying they were all trying to figure out how Jesus fits into the Trinity, because this is we're monotheistic, right? So how can Jesus be God and God be God, and how can the Spirit? How does all that work? So it's this Trinitarian conflict. And Arian was saying Christ was made, not begotten. And so we have the Nicene Creed that says Christ is very God of very God, begotten, not made. I mean, we read that creed, right? All of this, and I love this icon where the church has thrown Arius into what in other examples would be hell. I mean, that you see a lot of these dualistic, all the good guys and all the bad guys. And then, amazingly, Arius died in a horrific way, where all of his bowel contents came out in the middle of and blood came out in the middle of a situation with the whole church there, and he died from it. Couldn't have been poisoned. And I mean, that's normal, right? We all just, yeah. So there's a lot of power. There's a lot of power and power abuse going on. And now yes.
From a historical point of view,
Mm-hmm.
what was the period of downfall of Rome?
Of Rome, the Roman Empire, the first one, you might need to help me on this, but it was from what? It was before Christ up to about 500. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there was the Byzantine Empire, which was over to the east and grew. And then there's the Ottoman Empire that came kind of out of that, all that. So 313 was that what said the Milan Edict that said that all religions are to be practiced freely, right? 380, that's not very long later. The Edict of Thessalonica made Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, and all peoples shall practice the religion of the divine Peter the Apostle. We command that they will be called Catholics. They're not going to be Eastern Orthodox. What does this set up? A war between the Church of the East and the Church of the West, right? A war, because they shall be called all peoples. There's a problem with a religious state. There's not a lot of leeway for Jesus to find his way in there. I mean, I know the Spirit can get in any cracks, but we've taken a lot of the cracks away. So then we have Otto the Great in 900, and he says, I have to confirm the Pope. Y'all can elect him, but I have to confirm him. And he reports to me. So emperor had power over the Pope, not vice versa. So who is the head of the church? Who? Yeah, the emperor. And who's supposed to be the head of the church? Yes, Jesus, God, yes. So there's a problem with a religious nation. The Crusades, we have the religious nation states who are warring for power. They're warring for land, but they're using people's hearts and souls as a tool to do it, right? They're using it as a farce for the ultimate empire goals: land, resources, and power. No bueno. No bueno. Then, and this is over lots of, we've been almost 1,000 years from Christ. And now in the Reformation, 1500, 1,000 years from Constantine, really. And what happened in the Protestant Reformation? What was it about?
Getting back to the Bible.
Yes, rejecting the power of the Pope. Yeah, the printing press was then, getting back to the Bible. Yes, the Pope was still connected with the state. The state was still what am I trying to say? Interfering with the work of the church and directing it. And then you get these little guys with a little Luther writing down that these are mistakes in the church. This is not what God is about. God is not about assigning a bishop to be bishop because there was a land transfer. Assigning a priest that can't even read Latin to be the shepherd of a flock. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know about Calvin.
Calvin was born.
He was a lawyer. Yeah, that does make sense.
About wanting to reform the church, right?
Mhm.
Church. So, I mean, so they wanted to reform the church.
Absolutely. In that listing of all these grievances that Luther tacked on the door of Wittenberg in 1519, yeah, that was what he wanted to do. And so we have, it's all in response to the Catholic abuses in the church. And so the Lutheran Church, which Luther never wanted to form, right, ended up becoming, it was a Protestant, protesting the Catholic Church, became the Church of Germany. And Calvin, who was in Switzerland, I thank you for reminding me that he was a lawyer. He was absolutely a statesman. So what about separation of church and state for Calvin? Now, Calvin, for those who don't know, is the father of Presbyterianism. So we came through this lineage. And so Calvin held that the state and the church were mutually spiritual because the state adjudicated temporal matters under God, and the church adjudicated specifically spiritual matters, both opposing evil. Now, the state was doing that because it came, number one, they felt like God was head of the state. That Calvin thought that God was head of the state ultimately. And they're coming from this history of the state being connected I like to say in bed with the church. It's not a really good metaphor, but yeah, like they're very much not differentiated, there's so much overlap and poor boundaries between the two of them. In Calvin's vision, a society which was composed of a Reformed church and a church comprised of Reformed citizens were a force to beat back the world and all evil. Calvin sees the danger of entrusting the power to one or a few. He wants it spread out to all the people, right? The priesthood of all believers. Accordingly, he argues for a system compounded of aristocracy and democracy. So it was a separation of church and state of sorts, not really like where we are in the United States, but separation. You have him in Geneva, you have Luther in Germany. That's already become a state church in Germany, okay? And then Knox is over in England dealing with the church, which is, is it going to be the Church of England or is it going to be the Catholic Church? There are lots of warring in England, but still a religious state, a religious nation, where the government is involved. Just read some of those stories about the queens. Yes, kings and queens.
Going back to Germany, Germany wasn't like a united country at that time. It was
No.
a bunch of small.
Feudal,
Okay, so it's the Church of Germany. If it's
Germanic
accepted
lands.
if you're feudal lord of blessing.
Probably, yeah, because we didn't have the internet. Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, uh-huh.
Calvin noted that both the church and the state had a role to oppose evil.
Mm-hmm.
That they both had, in a well-working society, they
Mhm.
both had similar goals.
Yeah.
Which was to have a well-run organization, that everybody's coming together and doing the right thing and not being evil to one another. And I think that is an important thing that is a thread we sometimes lose,
Mm.
that both the church and the state in a well-working society have a similar goal.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty profound, isn't it? Thank you. So we have Knox, who is over in England dealing with these religious states of the Catholic Church and the king or queen, or the Church of England, the Archbishop and the king or queen. And it is messy, 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 y'all. And they have big empty churches over there, y'all, that have a lot of money poured into it historically. And, no, it was, yeah, it was obligatory. I mean, that's who we are. We are this religious. And so then when that impetus goes away, if it's just about doing and not about not about faith, it gets empty. And so Knox is upholding this this Presbyterial line, this line where the people should have the control of the church. And he is the one who is the brains behind the Book of Order and the structure of our government. And so all of that is from whence we have come. And I would say from whence our nation's government was formed. It's a very Presbyterian system where the power is in the hands of the people, and there are checks and balances on the guy in charge, just like there are checks and balances on, now Jesus is in charge, but Katie and me. There are checks and balances. I mean, that is the system. And so out of that context, this Presbyterian context, we have Calvinist Puritans who come over, right? It's all in that same time frame of 1500. And that's the context they're coming from, of this religious state that is devoid of the Spirit. I mean, the Spirit, I say that as a broad brush because the Spirit always is working her way in, always. And I know that bugged you that I just said her, but it still is a feminine term in the Old Testament, ruach. Ruach. Okay. Okay. So fast forward, we have. Let me see if I had any other notes here. Yeah. So we have a nation that is formed out of this context of the power in the hands of the people, a country that's formed in that context, and the idea of separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution, but is a founding father directive, right? And we come and we're rocking along with not all that easy. If you really look at our history, it hasn't been all that easy. And there's been a lot of, in that it's supposed to be the pursuit of happiness, and equality, that we are all created equal. And we have a lot to deal with that because we took advantage, the settlers, took advantage of a lot of people in their land and their lives. And that's part of our history. Fast forward to Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany used, through the German Christians movement, which was a government entity, a Nazi entity, they took leadership of the Protestant churches and started melding them together as the German Evangelical Church, a tool of Nazi ideology, regarding nationalism, anti-Semitism, and racism, and including cherry picking some of Luther's writings for justification, which he had written a piece on the Jews and their lies, and removing the Old Testament from the Bible because that's the Jewish part. Oh, come on. Oh my gosh. It's just, yeah. A polluted mutation of Christ's church. Okay, this was the Nazi evangelical church. And Hitler appointed the Reichsbishop, which is the empire's bishop. Oh, good. Whose task was to bring the church under the absolute control of the Third Reich and its heroes. So you talk about a church, a nation, a religious nation. Nazi Germany was absolutely a religious nation. In that it had co-opted the church for its own use and evil. So we have the Barmen Declaration. We had Karl Barth, who is a Presbyterian pastor and theologian. We have Dietrich Bonhoeffer and others who came together and said, no, this is not what the church is about. And said, in view of the errors, and this is one of our confessions in the Presbyterian Church, in our book of confessions, which I've loaned out, or I'd show it to you, to one of our potential new members who is here in the room. In view of the errors of the German Christians and of the present Reich church administration, which are ravaging the church and at the same time also shattering the unity of the German evangelical church, we confess the following evangelical truths. Now, so the German evangelical church existed, but through this German ministry, the leaders, they were digging in kind of like grabbing part of it for itself. And so the Barmen Declaration quotes scripture and then makes the kinds of corrective statements like this. We reject the false doctrine that the church could and should recognize as a source of its proclamation beyond and besides this one word of God, yet other events, powers, historic figures, and truths as God's revelation. There is only one revelation, and that is through the living word. And we reject the false doctrine that with human vainglory, the church could place the word and work of the Lord in the service of self-chosen desires, purposes, and plans. I mean, those are just two that I cherry picked out for you. Empty, empty glory. Glory is the often the presence of the Lord. You think of the presence of the Lord as being glory, right? Yeah. Human vainglory. So the emptiness. Yeah. So any questions or thoughts at this time?
Say something.
Yes, one sec. Yes. We do want this on tape.
Since we are, I'm going to say I'm a close friend of Theron Russell's, and all my ideas are exactly like his. Okay. Well,
Still get the mic.
well, Theron's house is being wrapped right this second. But when we talk about our country being founded on religious ideals, only 3 of the 13 colonies are founded for religious ideas at all. And then Connecticut and Rhode Island are spinoffs of Massachusetts Bay because they're led by ministers who utterly disagree with the Puritans. And the Puritans did not believe in separation of church and state. In fact, just the opposite. They were starting a Bible commonwealth in their own language. Maybe besides the ladies in this room, the greatest sermon ever preached in the United States is Winthrop's model of Christian charity on the way here, where he talks about the city on a hill and all of that. But they have no intention of giving anybody else religious liberty. They put people to death that insisted on worshiping another way, and they did not believe in separation of church and state. And it's one of the reasons that Roger Williams is driven out of the state and goes to Rhode Island. I mean, he would have died had he not been saved by the Narragansett Indians. But again, this idea that all of us come here for religious reasons is it just doesn't hold up. I mean, Virginia, the first colony, has no such drive to it. None of the southern colonies do, except for Maryland, which is a Roman Catholic haven. But I just think that's a mythological thing that we need to throw out here, that the guy who really pushed separation of church and state in the early days of the United States was a rebel. And I would say Roger Williams, besides maybe Cotton Mather and a couple of other great ministers, is the greatest intellect probably in early American history. And he saw that, but a lot of other people did not.
Mm-hmm. Good. I wish you were teaching this class with me.
I
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Oh, wait,
Thank
we
you
got
so much.
Katie over here. Yeah.
I also think it's important to say, like, even in Germany, like when things were happening, this was the church, right? Like the whole Nazi movement was the church. And it took, like, we like to say we went in on our Christian foundations and helped fight that war. It took us a long time to get there. It took the people who spoke out against it a long time to get there. It was not like overnight they said this was wrong. They said, oh, this is the church. Maybe we need to see where they're going with this. Maybe we need to figure it out. Maybe we need to reform it from within, before they finally got to the point where they said, no, this is not what we believe. So when we remember our history, we often remember it like there are two separate things, but all of this occurs over a really long period of time, that we have to discern that we're going to act differently, that we believe differently. It's not something that we just woke up and said, oh yeah.
Say they or the people in America that decided to fight against.
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
Both.
I am talking about both.
Yeah.
I mean, even before America went over there, we said, nope, these people can't come here. We don't want them, right? We don't want the Jews. We could have helped them escape at crucial points in history. And we said, no, we don't think that's our calling, right? So we have to remember those things too. You know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Interesting story behind all that.
So just so you know, that doesn't
It doesn't-
amplify. It's only for the online. You have to project
Okay.
for.
Okay. The interesting thing about what Katie just said is that it was also the beginning of the immigration of a lot of Arabic people here. And the story that's fascinating to me is a lot of you know Chris is from Detroit and was raised there and was around Henry Ford and all the things going on there. And there is such a large Arabic and therefore Islam population there now because Henry Ford would not let the Jewish people come into his space. And he specifically recruited bankers and doctors and all these mathematicians and engineers out of the Middle East to come and build the automobile industry with him because he did not want the Jewish people here. And that's part of the ugly history of Henry Ford. We kind of revere him and put him up on a thing, but he was known to be very anti-Semitic. It was all during this 1933 to 1945 time that he started recruiting the Islamic people because he thought they were not as evil as the Jewish people. So just a harsh part of our
Thank you
history.
for that story. Okay, well, let's switch gears just for a moment because I want to also highlight what Zionism and Christian Zionism, quote unquote, which is not Christian, and the role in the conflict in Israel and Palestine. So Zionists are people who are using Old Testament promises of God that the promised land will be returned to the people of God, and that Jerusalem will be, will be the center of that, and they're using this to justify the land and the taking of land and oppressing of the people to help God fulfill the promise. I don't know. God needs no help. I mean, okay, so it's a little bit presumptuous. I'm just saying. But an example, okay, is that so on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, "And all your descendants, I will give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates." That's the promised land, that Canaan. Now, I don't know why they're missing all your descendants, because I think there was something about Ishmael, and I think there was something about that means Islam. But and we call that the Jewish, Islamic, and Christian faiths are all Abrahamic faiths. But it just depends on what you want, how you want to parse it. So Christian Zionists are those who jump on the bandwagon and say yes, and they grab Revelation and cherry pick it and misread it and forget who Jesus is, and say that all of this stuff in the Middle East is the end time stuff, and we're going to help. I don't know if you all heard about the over 100 commanders or servicemen in the recent, the first attack on Iran, who complained formally that they were prayed over by their commander and named as instruments of God for the coming end times and the fulfillment of God's promise. This happened in our country. Look it up. Look it up. I want to show you this video from from an Orthodox rabbi who is speaking about Zionism. The Zionism. Let's see.
The mass slaughter in Gaza has nothing to do with the conflict between religion and Judaism and Islam. We have been living together as Jews and Muslims for literally hundreds of years, thousands of years. We've been living together.
He shows a picture. We'll talk about that.
How we live together. It's only an introduction of a political movement called Zionism, and it's using the name of Judaism to declare war on the people of Palestine, to declare and vilify the people of Palestine, that they're anti-Semites, anti-Jews. That's totally repugnant and false. We cannot be silent. We're Jews. Because we're Jews, we have to stand up and say, this is not true. It's not in our name. We totally object to this. We cry and hurt with the people of Gaza and Palestine. This is not a religious state. It's not a Jewish state. They're using the name Israel. They're masquerading in the Star of David in the name Israel. This is a criminal entity, and the mass slaughter in Gaza has nothing.
That's a repeat. So he's naming it so very clearly that they're saying they're a religious state. They're co-opting our faith, and they're obliterating a people in the name of Judaism and of God, and it's not okay. And so that is what a religious state is. He showed a picture. I wanted to say in another video, he shows that picture of him and his neighbors who are Palestinian, who they grew up. And he says, we grew up together, we played together, we babysat one another's kids, and that's what was torn up in 1948. Okay, here we go. So I've got I did not buy this, you can tell. So the cross on top of the Capitol means that Christ is the head of it. The cross on the top of the church means that Christ is the head of it. Is Christ the head of our government? No. It's supposed to be Congress. the people's representation as the head of the government. And this is a good depiction of what Christian nationalism is. And it often gets, we only have 3 minutes. Okay. We need another class that Mark's going to teach with me. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the first, maybe we'll extend. Where's Sandra? Sandra? Okay, you're listening. She's the head of discipleship. Okay. Christian nationalists and white evangelical Christians. So it has become racist. Okay. There is in the Christian nationalism that's happening today, there has become, it doesn't mean that Christian nationalists are racist, but that's what we're seeing. Okay. Sort of like what Katie was talking about. It happens, and you're going, wait, no, we're seeing this, and we have seen a rise in the KKK. We've had people marching in the streets that are claiming to be Christian, but they're marching against our colored, in all the many colors, our colored friends. I mean, there is nothing magic about being white. Ugh. Okay, so leave it. It's like I tell my dog, leave it. Okay, so, and the problem is, just like in the German evangelical church, the evangelical church, some of them are going, wait, what? Like, this is not okay. So it's not a clear-cut designation, but they're co-opting the good news for political and state purposes, contrary to Jesus' teaching. Matthew 25, and Jesus said, it's not just the Jews, it's all the goy, which means all the nations, which means all the Gentiles, and all the Gentiles and all the Jews equals all. It just does. Yeah, get over it. Yes. I want to introduce, I'm not going to do that. Well, disvangelical. Disvangelical. This is a coined term by Presbyterian pastors Ted Foote and Alex Thornburg. A theology that is, so disvangelical, so they took evangelical and they put dis, because the theology that is happening here is distorted, dysfunctional, and dystopian, turning the good news for the least of these into news that is exactly opposite of what it means to be evangelical. And so they're referring to white supremacy. They're referring to supporting inhumane treatment in the name of border control rather than creating a system that works justly. They're supporting these disevangelicals, so the white evangelical or the white Christian nationalists are supporting justice for some by bypassing, I would say, constitutional and government checks and balances. So you may see that coming up. So what does evangelical mean? It's gotten this bad rap because of the abuse, because of the co-opting. Yeah, be evangelical. Yeah, which means bringing the good news of Christ, right? It comes from, of course, you already know this, euangelion, which is the Greek word for good news, right? That's what evangelical means. Missional evangelism is evangelism. Actions speak louder than words. Jesus' good news, he didn't say it, he did it. He healed, he loved, he lifted up, he touched, all of that. And bringing the good news to whom?
Everyone.
Yes, particularly.
Elite.
Yeah. Those who have no need of a physician, he didn't come for them. He came for those who are sick. And caring for the widow. I was asked one other time by someone in this room, why do you keep talking about the widow, the orphan, and the alien? Because the Old Testament repeats it again and again and again. Deuteronomy it's like 17 times in Deuteronomy. We are supposed to care for the widow, and this is the Jewish people. Okay, this is from whence we have come. It's in Isaiah and also Psalms. I'm not going to quote my grandson, but it was pretty good. Yeah, I think, okay, I'm going to. I think that when there is Christian nationalism, it ends up being against the church and the Constitution. I debated that this year. And I said, why, John? Because then the church isn't about God or Jesus. It's about what the government wants. And the leaders are getting the benefits. And it's not about the Constitution either. Why not? Because if the state is about one religion, it can't guarantee freedom of religion. That's my 13-year-old. Oh. And Kate is going to tell you about this next week, because there was an overture to the General Assembly. I just know she's going to do it, about exactly this. And it passed, not in the form that it was proposed, but it passed. It will come out. The basis was the Barman Declaration, our Confession of 67, and the Belhar Confession, which is about apartheid. And it will be ratified by the presbyteries. 2/3, if 2/3 of the presbytery is ratified, it will go into a change in the Book of Order. So I thought we would close with a creed. Shall we? We reject the false doctrine that the church could have permission to hand over the form of its message and of its order to whatever it itself might wish, or to the vicissitudes of the prevailing ideological and political convictions of the day. We reject the false doctrine that beyond its special commission, the church should and could take on the nature, tasks, and dignity which belong to the state, and thus become itself an organ of the state. Ugh. We reject the false doctrine that with human vainglory, the church could place the word and work of the Lord in service of self-chosen desires, purposes, and plans. The word of God will last forever. Amen. Thank you all. Okay.